Alright, after months of procrastinating, I'm finally getting around to doing this. Today I'm going to show you how to get the smoothest day to night hyperlapse transition using the DJI Air 2S. What's going on? Welcome back to the channel. We are back here in Easton, Pennsylvania, of course visiting family for the holidays. It is approximately 10 o'clock in the morning and I'm out here scouting an area or scouting a location to do my day to night hyperlapse transition. Now today I'm going to show you how to do the smoothest, or the technique that I use to do the smoothest day to night transition. But first, there's a couple things you need to take into consideration when doing your day to night hyperlapse. During the day, you don't want to do your day portion of your hyperlapse too early in the day or midday because the sun will be a little bit too bright. You want your day to night transition to look more natural, so I suggest doing it later on in the afternoon, maybe a couple hours before sunset. Alright, so in this video I'm not going to get too much into editing the photos. I did do that in the previous video. You can check that out. I'll leave a link down in the description below if you want to learn how I do my hyperlapse to make it look a lot better than what the drone generates. So in your hyperlapse, you definitely want to get a lot of motion. Either it be the clouds moving or cars or people walking or something like that. So in this particular hyperlapse, I'm going to capture this bridge right here. So with the cars going across and the lights from the downtown area, it should be an interesting hyperlapse. So what we're going to do now is go ahead and set up our hyperlapse. So we'll have everything ready to go for later on in the day. So hold tight. Alright, so I'm going to go out and set up my hyperlapse with the bridge being the center focal point of it. Alright, so the first thing I'm going to do is go into hyperlapse. And then I'm going to keep it in auto. We will tweak the settings later on when we do the actual hyperlapse. And then I'm going to put it in waypoints. We're going to use waypoints for this hyperlapse. So this here, keeping the bridge in the center, this is going to be my first waypoint. Then I'm going to bring it closer and I'm going to decrease my altitude. I'm going to set this as my second waypoint. Then I'm going to move over here and then try to keep this camera angle good. I'm still good with the camera angle. And I'm going to set this as my third waypoint. Then I'm going to go into my settings here and I'm going to set the intervals, 3-second intervals. And then the length will be 10 seconds. And then I will go back and hit this icon here on the left. And I will save it. Save it as day to night. Hit save here. And there you go. We're all saved. Now we can come back later and execute the hyperlapse with no problem. welcome back. It is approximately 4 o'clock right now. The sun is just going behind the clouds, and it's maybe 45 minutes before sunset. So we're going to go ahead and take off and do our first hyperlapse. So what we're going to do is go close to our first hyperlapse, the first waypoint. First, I'm going to put it in hyperlapse mode, and then I'm going to bring up. I'm going to go to waypoints, and then I'm going to bring up our saved hyperlapse, the day to night. All right. So what I'm going to do is put it in Pro mode, and in Pro mode, I'm going to change my settings. Now for the day hyperlapse, what I'm going to do is change my shutter speed to 1/4 of a second, quarter of a second. I'm going to change my white balance to back up to 5300, and I'm going to shoot in 4K. I wanted it to be a 4K hyperlapse, and I'm going to shoot in RAW because I'm going to edit these photos myself. And like I mentioned before, if you haven't seen my other hyperlapse video, I go over everything from start to finish on how I edit my hyperlapses. So right now it looks like everything is good. My ISO is at 100, and it looks like I'm a little bit overexposed, but I believe that's probably in the sky. So what I'm going to do is just leave it there, and I'm going to press start, and then go to the first waypoint, which I'm nearby. Now keep in mind, if you are too far away from the waypoint, the first waypoint, the aircraft will not, well, it'll take its time getting there. It won't go there like immediately. It will either take its time or it won't go there at all. So you have to get close enough to the first waypoint and then press start, and then your aircraft will go over there to the first waypoint. All right, so if you remember from before, I set my intervals for 4 seconds. I'll explain why I did that in the night hyperlapse. It all has to do with the settings and what I'm trying to achieve on the night hyperlapse. So this is going to take 200 photos, and we're just going to go ahead and speed through this. If anything happens in between, I'll address it, and then we'll go from there. All right.
Shooting is narration.
All right, so we just finished the day portion of our hyperlapse, and we're just going to wait maybe 30 more minutes until it gets completely dark, and we'll go from there. All right. All right, so what I'm going to do from here, I'll go back to the hyperlapse I did earlier, the day to night. Select that. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to rotate the aircraft, face it towards the bridge here. And I'm trying to get light streaks. So I want to get the nice light trails that the lights, the cars, the headlights and the tail lights of the cars. So what I'm going to do is increase my shutter speed up to 2 seconds. All right, that should get good enough light streaks. As a matter of fact, I'm going to increase it or slow it down even more to 2.5. All right, and I have my ISO set to 100, and you can see my exposure here is only negative 0.7, so I'm good. I'm going to change my white balance to 4500 Kelvin, and I'm going to shoot 4K. I want it in 4K, and of course I want raw photos. And because I am just a little bit underexposed, that's okay. I can edit it in post because I'm going to be editing the raw photos, and you can bring a lot more detail out in the raw photos than you can with JPEG. So we should be good. So I'm going to press start.
The aircraft is heading to the first waypoint.
And the reason why I set my intervals at 4 seconds, because I wanted to get a 2.5 second exposure, and 4 seconds allows it to process the raw photo and then cycle into another interval. All right, so we're finally back in the lab. We're going to get this hyperlapse together. But before we get started, if you guys can do me a favor, if you can hit that thumbs up if you guys are enjoying this video so far, because it does help YouTube push it out to more people who are searching for content like this. All right, so one thing I wanted to go over, actually there's a couple points I wanted to go over because this hyperlapse was a little bit difficult to put together. There are a couple different factors that you need to take into account when doing your hyperlapses. For one is the wind factor. Ideally, you want to do your hyperlapses when the wind is not too strong. However, on this day, the wind was a little bit moderate over the river, and the wind actually picked up at night when I did the night hyperlapse. Also, you want to take into account the movements that you plan out with your hyperlapse. In hindsight, I should have just did either a straight line or maybe a lateral line just to do this hyperlapse because I was blending them together. So the more movements that you do with your drone, the more likely that your footage will be that much more unstable. So as you saw in this video, I did head straight towards the bridge while descending and decreasing my altitude all at the same time while rotating the aircraft. Now with all those movements, it's more likely that my hyperlapse will be that much more unstable. So when you're putting a hyperlapse together yourself, you want that footage to be as stable as it could be because you're going to have to stabilize it yourself with your software. So the software is not perfect and you're not always going to get it as stable as you want it to get. So the more you can do to mitigate that factor, the better it will be. So my editing software of choice is Final Cut Pro, and I already edited the raw photos and put the hyperlapse together beforehand. If you want to learn how to do that, I do have a step-by-step, like I mentioned earlier, I do have a step-by-step guide on how to put your hyperlapses together with the Air 2S, and also it does apply to other drones as well. Make sure you check that out. There will be a link in the description below. This was a difficult edit, so I am going to show you how I did it. This is a little bit more advanced. It's not just putting it together and just syncing it up. I had to do a little different things you'll see in a second, so let's get to it. All right, so let's start by dragging in our clips. And these aren't stabilized, so we will have to stabilize them. As you can see, this is the day clip, and this is the night. As you can see, it's not stabilized. So what we're gonna do is stabilize them first. So once that's done, I'm just gonna make a couple adjustments using Smooth Cam feature. So both clips are stabilized, and it's still a little bit wobble in there. But what I'm going to do is probably run it through Adobe After Effects once I complete everything. So the next step is to stack them on top of each other. So I'm going to put the night hyperlapse on the bottom. Then I'm going to select the day portion of the hyperlapse, and we'll reduce the opacity so I can see what I'm working with underneath. So the problem with this was I needed to align this up because it was thrown off completely by the wind and also by the different settings I had. So what I'm going to have to do is just increase the size to give me a little bit room to line them up. So I'm going to increase the size of the day hyperlapse to about around 120. And then I'm going to go down to the night hyperlapse and increase that as well to about 132 or something like that. And I'm going to put the playhead at the beginning and then find a point where I want to make the transition. So I want to get more of the night hyperlapse into this whole entire thing. So I'm going to just maybe get a second or so, a couple seconds in the hyperlapse before I make the transition. So right about here, because I want to see a lot of the city at night. So I'm just going to leave a marker here on the day hyperlapse and a marker there on the night hyperlapse, so I won't lose my place. So from here, we're going to zoom in so we can get a better look. And as you can see, it's way off. So I'm going to do my best to line this up. And I'm going to use the top layer. I'm going to use the day hyperlapse, and I'm just going to use the day hyperlapse to line it up with the night. So from here, I'm going to click on the transform tool, and it allows me to move this around. And since the bridge is the center focal point, I'm going to try my best to line up the bridge here to where it'll blend nicely. So I'm going to have to rotate maybe just a little bit. Maybe somewhere in between. Let me see if I can put point. All right, I think that's good there. So what I'm line it up best I can. And I'm going to look around and see if everything is lined up. Now, if it's a little bit off, that's okay, because when it's in motion, it'll blend in nicely. So everything looks good there. Everything looks good here. The bridge looks pretty on point. Over here, everything looks okay. Like I said, when it's in motion, it'll blend in a little bit better. And everything over here looks pretty good. All right. I might need to adjust this just a little bit more. Just on the rotation, just a little bit more. Right there. And down here, may have to move this around. So I'm going to make a couple more adjustments. All right, I think we're good right there. So let's zoom this back out. So now at this point, we want to make our transition. So there's a couple ways you can do this. You can use the dissolve tool, and what you would do is just shorten this down to the point where you want to transition, and then add in dissolve, and then reduce that dissolve down to the required length. But I don't like using the dissolve tool because it doesn't seem like you have that much control over it. But what I like to do is use keyframes. And I'm going to use keyframes with the opacity level here. So what I'm going to do is place my playhead on top of the markers here and go back 5 to 6 frames. I'm going to click on this top level here, the day hyperlapse, and I'm going to click the keyframe at 100% opacity. Then I'm going to place the playhead back on the marker and then move forward 5 to 6 frames. And then place another keyframe there, but at 0 opacity. All right, so by using the keyframes, you have a little bit more control over your transition. You can make it longer or shorter. You can even move it around if you want, but you will be able to be a little bit more precise with it. So now that I press play and run it through, it's nice and smooth. It looks like everything came out nice and smooth. And like I told you before, while it's in motion, you get a smoother transition. Now we can even take it a step further if you want to add a little bit more motion blur within that transition to smooth it out even more. So I do have a motion blur plugin that I like to use sometime. So I'm going to open up this here so you can see the video animation, meaning the markers where I put the keyframes. There's one keyframe here, and there's the second keyframe there. So I'm going to take the moderate motion blur 2, that's the one I like to use, and place it right on top and make it the same length as the transition. So now when I play it, looks like a smoother transition. Smooths it out just even more, and there you go. So also another thing I want to do is, since I zoomed in the night portion, I want to zoom it out after I make the transition. So I'm going to go into the video animation, line up my playhead on the last keyframe of the transition here. And then on the Night Hyperlapse, I'm going to start zooming out of the Night Hyperlapse. So I did crop in a little bit on the Night Hyperlapse so we can make the adjustments. But then right after we do the transition, I'm going to start cropping back out to get, you know, the full view. So at this point, I'm going to drop a keyframe here. Then I'm going to move my playhead to make it a little smoother. Move my playhead towards the end and drop a keyframe right there, and then change the scale back to 100. So by the time it reaches the end of the hyperlapse, it'll be at its full scale. So let's play that. And it kind of slows down the hyperlapse a little bit. It looks like it's slowing it down a little bit because it's zooming out as it's moving forward. So it kind of slows it out a little bit. You can also take this a step further. You can also use another stabilizing software to smooth out your hyperlapse even more. I like to use Adobe After Effects. They do have a warp stabilizer that is pretty good. So what I did once I rendered this out, I ran it through Adobe After Effects and use the warp stabilizer, and I'll show you that clip right now. So one tip, you may want to do your hyperlapses in reverse. There is an option in the hyperlapse menu where you can do your hyperlapse in the reverse order. I didn't get a chance to do that, but I wish I did, because you never know which one or which order may look the best. But I did put my hyperlapse in reverse order, and I'll show you that right now. So don't forget to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell on the way out. And if hyperlapses with the Air 2S is something that you're interested in, click on this video right here. This is where I show you how to put all this together to get amazing hyperlapse. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.